Steel isn't strong, boy. Flesh is stronger. There, on the rocks.
When we hear the word deficit, we probably think of a deficiency.
Come to me, my child. It's time to vote.
I'm voting Trump.
Or shortfall. Just as a 6 becomes a 9 when we view it from a different angle,
That is strength, boy. That is power.
I'm just doing my job.
I'm voting reform.
The truth, which is quickly deleted on YouTube, even when no offensive words are used, is this. People who live on real allodial land owned by others are slaves to the landowners. This truth can only be offensive to those complicit in the slave system.
I'm just doing my job.
I'm voting Biden.
I'm just doing my job.
Sometimes we have to work within the system in order to beat the system.
Most believe there is no way out of the system, so they do the best they can in the system, which is helping the system enslave them and their fellow man, and say to people who want a better system stuff like this.
Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, Phil, but utopia doesn't exist. You've just got to make the best of the situation you're confronted with. You can run, but you can't hide. Or, as Bob says, you can't run away from yourself.
The only people running away from themselves are the people who say defeatist stuff, like that. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the unbelievable How Money is Really Created show. Tonight, we have a spectacular show that defies logic, sanity, and your hard-earned cash.
I'm just doing my job.
And like the title suggests, many of you will still not believe it.
I'm
Even
just
when a person
doing
doing
my
it
job.
tells you straight.
We print it digitally, so we as a central bank, we
just
have the
doing my
ability to
job.
create money digitally, and we do that by buying
I'm
treasury
voting
bills
Trump.
or bonds or other government-guaranteed securities, and that actually increases the money supply.
I'm just doing my job.
We also print actual currency, and we distribute that through the Federal Reserve banks.
I'm voting reform.
Isn't that magical, folks? But wait, there's more. Next, we have the state representative, the juggler of all things valuable. He gives this valueless money value, with the promise of the fruits of your labor, extracted by taxation.
And we do that by buying treasury
voting
bills
Trump.
or bonds.
No. There is more to it than that, my dear audience.
There ain't nothing to laugh about in this situation.
Perhaps because you're the jape,
Watch your tongue.
and you remember your place.
My place is on this land, and it belongs to all of us.
It belongs to those who can afford it, and I don't see many of those people here.
It's complicated and managed by intelligent men like me,
I'm
who
just
need
doing
paying
my
for
job.
our intelligence and go-get-em attitudes.
when we hear the word deficit, we probably think of a deficiency or shortfall.
So now the Fed, is it private? Is it a private institution or is it a government institution?
Depends who you ask.
Okay, a deficit always sounds ominous. So when we hear that the federal government just ran a $3 trillion budget deficit, it can sound worrying.
In the 2008 financial crisis, we saw what happened when one bank failed, right? And that was Lehman Brothers.
Right.
Every single major bank in the United States, and probably ultimately because they're all holding each other's debt, right? And every single major bank in the United States was or would have been bankrupt.
And it can even anger people.
So reserves are how banks bank. And those reserve accounts are held at accounts at the Fed. Does that make sense?
But there's another way to think about government deficits. Just as a 6 becomes a 9 when we view it from a different angle, a government deficit becomes a financial surplus when we look at it from another perspective.
Yeah, so what happened with the troubled asset relief program or quantitative easing, all those rounds of quantitative easing, was that the Fed just credited banks' bank accounts with reserves, which are worth 100 cents on the dollar. They're a completely safe asset, and removed these horrible assets off the asset side of the balance sheet of the banks. And the Fed can continuously, if it wanted to, run be bankrupt.
Again, utter nonsense. The state does not conspire with the banks to exploit the people by getting the people to pay the bankers and statesmen for the money the people create. That's just not what happens. But I have to say, if they did, that would be very clever.
Oh, it gets better. Now, watch as the state representative borrows this now with value money and pays interest to do so with, you guessed it, more tax income.
I'm just doing my job.
No. That's just not the case. If it were, it would mean private individuals are printing money, forcing you to give it value with your labor, then getting you to borrow that same money and charging you interest on it using your labor.
Nigel is an intelligent human being who doesn't suffer fools. He's a straight-talking badass, like Trump. Nobody wants to hear the truth.
I'm voting Trump.
If it were, it would mean private individuals are printing money, forcing you to give it
A government deficit becomes a financial surplus when we look at it from another perspective.
How do you describe the gentleman who has just been on the screen?
He's Mr.
No, come on, he's
a
A.
smay.
He's A.
Smay.
Yeah, come on then.
He's a smay.
He's A.
He's a smay.
He's A.
He's a
Smack. Head.
I did it.
Brutal. Now the ultimate test. Can you say it to him in person?
Of course they all lie. Reform are the only ones speaking up. So I'm voting for them. If it only pisses off Labour and the Conservatives, I'm happy.
They're attacking him because it's the only truth I've heard on the news in years.
Farage makes it look easy because he's telling the truth. He doesn't have to use a script or memories constantly.
Just like Trump. Farage
Of
has
course
really
they all
got
lie.
the establishment
Reform are
worried.
the only ones
loves this
speaking
country.
up.
He especially.
So I'm voting for them. If it only pisses off Labour and the Conservatives, I'm happy.